In a previous video, I mentioned that language is a divine gift. It is through language that we construct our experience of what we call reality. And I got very good feedback from a lot of you about the role of language, not only in humans, but in all species and in the entire ecosystem of existence. So, just as an aside, after I graduated from high school, I focused mostly on English literature in my college years. I did not take biology in high school, so my father, who wanted me to go to medical school, actually got me a private tutor to teach me biology. This is before pre-med, while I was only maybe 15 years old. And my private tutor would take me out into gardens and gutters and little ponds to look at plants, and also we used to hunt for frogs. So it's pretty gruesome. We used to hunt for frogs, and then we used to pit them to study their anatomy and physiology, etc. And this is right before I went to pre-med, and then, of course, after that, medical school. But all along, because of my interest in language, I was fascinated by the idea that it is not just you and me that communicate through language. And of course, we use sounds and squiggles, but also gestures, body language, facial expressions, tone of voice, and all that as part of our language. But then, as I started to look at the whole ecosystem of life, it became obvious to me that one of the distinguishing features of every life form is to be able to communicate within its own species, but also across species. And so that became, for me, a very fascinating avenue to explore God's creation or divine creation through language in nature. So while, of course, as humans, we have developed an extraordinary way to communicate, symbols and words, in a vast variety of diverse forms. Language is universal in nature. So plants communicate, insects communicate, ecosystems communicate, and sometimes not only within species but across species. In plants, I think the most significant way of communication is chemical language. So plants release pheromones to attract pollinators. They emit distress signals when attacked, and even send warnings to neighboring plants about impending danger. Also, plants communicate through color. Vibrant flowers are visual signals to attract pollinators, while thorns and bitter taste deter herbivores, animals that eat plants. And there's something called, very interesting in plants, something called silent screams. Silent screams. And silent screams are used by some plants, which actually scream literally at ultrasonic frequencies when stressed. And they then potentially attract predators to their attackers. Once again, recent research suggests that some plants scream at ultrasonic frequencies when stressed, potentially attracting predators to their attackers. You've heard me talk about the waggle dance that bees perform. Bees perform elaborate waggle dances to guide other bees to food sources. And recently I came across some research that says that bees, when they go near a plant which has lots of pollen, bees have some electrical signals that are emitted through hairs on the body of bees, and these electrical signals communicate with the electromagnetic field of plants. So when the bee approaches a plant which has lots of nectar, and it emits a positive charge, the plant in turn, the electromagnetic field has a negative charge, so the pollen actually jumps from the plant to the bee, and then the bee goes back to its hive, does a waggle dance so the other bees know where to go for this particular flavor or this particular nectar. However, if the plant has already depleted its nectar for the time being, then its electrical field is altered. So when the next bee approaches it, the electromagnetic field sends a message to the bee, I don't have any nectar. And this electromagnetic signaling is happening between plants and bees for their survival, but also for the propagation of the species. Okay, what are other examples of sounds of what appear to us meaningless but are actually very important for communication? Crickets, they chirp. Grasshoppers do something called stridulation, they stridulate. Of course, bees buzz and use sound for mating, social defense, and also social cohesion. Animals use a wide variety of vocalizations to communicate. Birds birds will sing intricate songs for courtship and for territory and for defense. Wolves know how to howl to assemble the pack, and whales sing complex songs that travel vast distances under the ocean. Of course, then there's body language. Not only do we have body language through facial expression, eye movement, tone of voice, gestures, but animals do too, from tail wags and posture shifts to displays of teeth and feathers. Animals use body language to express dominance and fear and submission and much, much more. Chemical signatures I already mentioned, but scent markings allow animals to claim territory, identify individuals, even track prey. And of course, we take the cake as humans with the power of words. As I've said, all my life has been basically, I've made a living selling words. We are the language champions as humans. We use spoken and written language to convey complex ideas, emotions, and information. And we also, of course, use non-verbal communication with our facial expressions, posture, tone of voice, things that I mentioned. And now, technology, from written symbols to radio waves and the internet. Humans have expanded our communication range and complexity beyond any other species. We can eavesdrop now by looking at radio signals, microwave background on the origins of the universe. And of course, there's communication within ecosystems. So in nature, communication extends beyond individual interactions. The timing of flowering, animal migrations, and even the health of a forest can all be seen as forms of communication within the ecosystem, where each element influences and responds to others. So, what is happening here? Let me actually suggest you that ultimately, there is only one language, and that is the language of the divine. And there's not metaphorical, but literal meaning to the word or to the phrase. And first there was the word was with God, and the word was made into flesh. This is literal. The sounds of nature and even mantras and rituals in spiritual traditions have a deep understanding of how to communicate with nature and with the divine through language. And we can actually go to the roots of all language. And what is the root of all language? What is the root? Tell me. The root is silence. Silence differentiates into innumerable modes of communication across the universe. And ultimately, all language comes from the divine. The silent mind of the divine differentiates into innumerable ways of communication. Going deep to the source of all language actually allows us to communicate in silence with other species. At the risk of ridicule, let me share with you a story. I go to this conference called the Science of Consciousness in Arizona, and it's hosted by Stuart Hameroff, and right now they're getting a lot of attention because of their theories of consciousness. Sir Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff are publishing a lot on the science of consciousness. But at a previous conference, when I was there, I met a young woman who came up to me and she said, I communicate with birds. And I kind of, tried to avoid her. I thought she was excuse my language, that she was a New Age aficionado with New Age ideas. And she said, I communicate with birds. So I was being polite to her. And then she also said that she was doing a PhD on animal communication. And she was at the Karolinska Institute in Sweden, which of course immediately caught my attention. We are so bamboozled by credentials, especially big names and academic institutions. So I said, tell me more about how you communicate with birds. And she said, let me show you. And so we were in a garden and we sat on a bench, and she, with her eyes, she looked at a bird that was in one of the trees across the garden. She made some eye movements, and within about 5 minutes, the bird literally landed on her lap. And she stroked it and then, let it go, and it flew off again. So I turned to her and I said, was that bird language? And she said, no, that was the language of the divine. And I said, what language is that? And she said, silence. I went into the most silent mode of being and then asked the bird to come. And it did. So this is a true story, whether you believe it or not. But I think you don't have to be proficient in all these different modes of communication. If you go to the source of all language, then intention organizes its own fulfillment. Let me know what you think.